will be revealed. Myths dispelled.
From the studio gym where excuses never apply.
It's Super with your host, Carl Lenore.
Well, I hope you can see me. I mean, hear me, because you can't see me. I got to do something. Hang on, guys. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, well, problem solved. I think you can see me now. Anyway, we have a great show planned for you today. I got to learn to put my mic further away from my mouth, I've been told. I'm overmodulating. Today, we're going to be talking about how spending time in the garden is actually linked to better health and well-being. Later in the show, we're going to be talking about, someone called me out on one of my rants about my understanding of viruses and virology. And so I'm going to see if I can defend my position, but chances are I won't, and I'll be exposed for knowing nothing about virology. So that'll be a good thing. Before we get started, of course, we must thank our title sponsor, Legendary Foods. The website is eatlegendary.com. If you go there, you will be able to save 10% off anything you buy there. Their tasty pastry is amazing. It's a Pop-Tart with 9 grams of protein, less than 1 gram of sugar. Buy them for your kids. School is going to be starting again eventually, someday. Send them to school with this. Their friends will think they're eating a garbage Pop-Tart, but they're actually eating something healthy. You can get those. You can get their seasoned nuts, seasoned almonds are unbelievable. And they also have nut butters that taste like they're loaded with sugar, but they're not. Eatlegendary.com is the website. Use the code SHR10 to save 10% off all of your purchases. Let me bring my guest on to balance the ugly face that I have with the pretty face that Dr. Shawn Debell has. How you doing, Dr. Debell?
Good.
Thanks for being here with us. So this study that you are the lead author looked at the people who spend time in the garden, looked at their health and their well-being, and found a correlation. Why this study? What research preceded this that you felt these questions needed to be answered?
I think there's kind of quite a bit of research that went on that made us decide to do this one. So, I mean, firstly, there's all this research showing that green space is good for our health and well-being, and kind of increasing amounts of that, but it tends to concentrate on, if you live in a greener neighborhood, is your health better, or look at things like parks and playing fields and other public spaces like that. But if you kind of look at particularly urban areas, lots of the land cover is gardens. I think in the UK, I'm not quite sure on the stats for America, but about 30% of land cover is made up of gardens. So obviously there's a real potential there for, benefiting people's health and well-being if there are these links between green space and health. So we were interested in looking at that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, do we see the same effects of just spending time in parks? Now we know that, and you talk about this in your research, right? That people have access to green spaces, as you say, and they can go to parks. Is there something magical about getting your hands in the dirt? I remember we did a show probably 4 or 5 years ago that there was some sort of microbe in soil that helped to mitigate depression.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons that we were particularly interested in this, because obviously if you're having a garden, it's quite different to having a public space, isn't it? There's this kind of sense of ownership and there's control. You can do what you want, but also, we were looking kind of at gardening generally in our study, but there have been some studies showing that when you're growing a plant, you're kind of, connecting with it, and that kind of, because you're the one supporting it, it's relying on you, that sort of thing, that kind of really can contribute to your sense of well-being, having responsibility like that.
So it almost comes back to the whole notion that purpose seems to make people feel better about their lives. And if you have this purpose of caring for this plant, and especially if it's a vegetable that you're going to harvest and eat, make a salad from, there's this sense of accomplishment that probably harkens back to our evolutionary days, right?
Exactly, yeah. And coming back to what you were saying about the kind of environmental side of things, so there are several so this hasn't been looked at for gardens, but when we're looking at public green spaces, there are kind of several kind of environmental hypotheses about how they might be benefiting health and well-being. So like you said, the kind of microbes in the soil potentially, but also, you know, being exposed to microbes more generally, that could potentially be good for your immune system. And just being outside, you know, I don't know if you heard of the vitamin D hypothesis, but that kind of, you know, being in the sunshine and it boosting your vitamin D is actually thought to be really important.
Yes. So you found in this research that the health benefits and well-being observed in people who gardened was comparable to people who lived in wealthier parts of the country versus the poorest parts of the country, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
But wouldn't it make sense that wealthy people have more access to gardens to begin with?
Yeah, so this is something that we thought about in the study. So first of all, we kind of looked at the sample and looked at who had access to a garden and whether we could see differences. So there were some kind of differentials, you know, people in living in wealthier areas were more likely to have a private garden. Kind of older people were more likely to have a private garden, but actually the vast majority of people still did have access. So I think it was about 90% of people in this highest income category, but still 70% in the lowest income category. So then when we actually ran the models, we put in those kind of variables on income and where people lived to see whether they were the things kind of influencing that relationship. And we found that after controlling for them, that association between gardening and health is still there.
So, because that was my next question. My next question was going to be, doesn't it make sense that people who are already healthy and have energy would do lots of different activities, including gardening, and people who don't feel good and have lots of chronic pain are unhealthy, they wouldn't venture out into the garden because they attribute that work to feeling horrible. Is there a possibility that healthier people just garden and that's why we have a higher level of health and well-being in gardeners?
So trying to think back to the models now and what exactly we put in, but basically we looked at two activities in the garden when we were doing the studies. We looked at whether you were actually, you know, being active and gardening, but we also looked at relaxing in the garden because, you know, they're quite different in terms of what you're doing. So we were thinking about things like this, and we found that even if you were just going out and relaxing in the garden, that's still connected to your well-being, particularly to this thing called eudaimonic well-being, which is how worthwhile you feel your life is. So so even if you are kind of don't feel able to garden,
feeling good, you'll feel better after gardening, and that's true of activity in general. I mean, really, we are designed to move and work. And we have been led to believe that the more successful you are, the less you work and the less you move, which is, you know, so counterintuitive to our evolutionary journey to begin with. But you're right, getting up and getting around and moving and being active. And you're right. And when you tie it into something where you plant something and weeks and months later it blossoms and it flourishes and it was your efforts that kind of propelled it along its path, there is a great deal of reward to that. You know, someone joked, a fellow who works for the show, Kirkland Morletti, texted me this morning and said, because he knows Elisa Profumo books the appointments for the show, and she's an avid gardener. Her garden right now looks amazing. It looks like a resort, her backyard. And he said, Elisa is trying to influence you to work harder in the garden with her by having you do this show. But the reality is that she works so hard in the garden, and she does say all the time that it makes her feel better to be out there with her hands in the dirt. What about grounding? There's a lot of research now that through evolution, we have become more insulated. Rubber sole shoes, homes that are, you know, built where you don't touch the earth any longer. And I actually experienced this firsthand. We drew blood from a dark field and put my blood on a dark field microscope and before and after grounding, and the red blood cells clump together. It's called the rouleau effect. They actually stack up like coins, but after grounding, they were all edge to edge. So I saw immediate changes in my blood from grounding. What about just the fact that getting out there and touching the earth actually is contributing to some charging element of our body?
I don't think I know much about that, but I do know. So one of the kind of main hypotheses we have with green space and why it might be good for you in terms of kind of an evolutionary sense is something called the biophilia hypothesis. So obviously you did, evolve in these natural environments, and so there's a theory that we're in kind of urban environments. There's lots of stresses and things like car noise, and just kind of even visually things like concrete. And so being in a natural environment and being able to just kind of rest your eyes on plant life, or hear more natural noises, is something that can both kind of restore you mentally so that you're able to concentrate better, and also kind of reduce these stresses. To make you.
Yeah. Ricardo Davis, who watches the show from Jamaica, says that he loves making. I love making your own. I'm sure he means fruit and food, and we people in Jamaica always do the best. And we find that more rural or even country environments, people tend to do more planting and harvesting of their own foods. And as you get into the cities, there's less of that because space is a commodity, but you can still do this on your back deck. Lots of people are building box gardens now where they have, maybe a couple meter, a meter by a couple meter wide box. They'll plant stuff in it and they'll harvest their herbs, and you can still do all this stuff even without the added space. So how is this study designed? Explain how this study was designed. How did you get your information for this study?
So this all came from survey data. So there's a survey that runs in England. It's run by kind of a government body, and it's weekly, and the sample is kind of representative of the general population, and it's asking about people's visits to the natural environment, their contact with nature. And there are a couple of questions in that one asking people about whether they have access to a garden. So a private garden, a private kind of outdoor space like a concrete yard, or a private communal garden. And then there's also a question which asks them about whether they gardened or relaxed in the garden. So those were the kind of main things that we concentrated on from the survey. But then it also asks all this information about things like their age and their gender, all this kind of income information, so that we could look at those in the models and whether they might be influencing people's health.
This was over a pretty long length of time too, right? How long? The study
exactly.
started? Yeah. When was it? When did it start?
10 years ago. So, yeah.
So consistently, when people spent time gardening, their ability to identify their lives as having more joy and feeling better and feeling healthier and being engaged, that was much higher.
Yeah, exactly. We looked at like two types of well-being. So one is feeling satisfied with your life, and one is how worthwhile you think your life is. And both of those were associated with health and well-being. I think one of the kind of interesting things is that having a private garden was associated with better value to, like, feeling your life is more satisfied with your life. But actually doing this gardening or relaxing in your garden, that was associated with feeling it was worthwhile. So yeah, I think there's really something about feeling things are worthwhile from doing those activities in the garden.
Did it matter if you were growing beautiful flowers versus edible plants?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't have that much information on what people actually did. It was just, whether they had gardens. But I think, that would be something that would be really interesting to look at in further research. And I know from some kind of qualitative work that both of these are associated with health and the people finding things worthwhile. And I think though with the kind of fruit and veg growing, there are also opportunities from that, obviously, to improve things like nutrition. So potentially some more benefits there that you could get.
I mean, I know there are more benefits, but I think that people who love to grow pretty flowers, they probably are just thrilled to have a garden filled with pretty flowers that they don't get to eat. And people who love the idea, the whole farm to table movement, and actually the UK is way ahead of the United States in this area. They really are. They put a lot more value on growing food, even though we have the Midwest, which is commercial growing. But I actually think that Prince Charles and some of the royal family have kind of set the tone, because they have that beautiful garden. They have their own honey. They have their own cows that they milk, and they drink raw unpasteurized milk, which everybody thinks, oh, it's so bad for you. So I kind of feel like, regardless of how you feel about the monarchy and their contribution to governing, they have set the stage that these things are important. And here in the United States, we have people, in government saying, oh, you don't have to worry about organic, and, consume all of the pesticide laden vegetables. They're okay. And it's completely opposite, which causes a lot of confusion for people. Well, is it good or isn't it good? But it's really interesting, because we are starting to see now, because of the farm to table movement, people are becoming more conscious about local growers and the quality of locally grown foods. And they're asking the right questions. So we're now seeing kind of an awakening. Even in the inner cities, we're now starting to see people go, oh, I think I want grass-fed beef, grass-finished beef. I think I want organic, vegetables. And so it's really becoming very important. And growing your own is the best, because you have complete control on what goes on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk more about this study. So were there any things that popped out at you that you didn't expect to learn from this research?
I don't think there was anything massively unexpected. Well, I guess we were kind of hoping that, health would be linked in this way. But I think two of the things that probably most surprising were just how strong the relationship was. As you said, it's the same as the difference between those in the highest income group and the lowest income group. So I don't think we expected it to be quite that big, this difference.
Right.
But also another thing that we looked at in the study was whether people visited nature more if they had a garden and used it or not. And we actually found that people did tend to do that. So that was quite interesting from the point of view of when we're thinking about planning urban environments. Say it's really important to have gardens and to have parks and places like that. And I guess also maybe there's something there around people being more connected with nature, being more likely to visit parks, being more likely to garden.
So do you expect, so there are now here in the United States, we have urban gardens, right? So where people in a community will start a cooperative, and they'll literally rent a piece of land, and every person will get a little plot, and you go and grow what you want on it. Do you suspect that this phenomenon will confer over to people who are living in inner cities that are far away from nature, but have these little plots where they can go and garden? Do you suspect that this could actually become a public health resource at some point in time for people in the inner cities?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think that having that, I mean, I know it's not immediately by their home, but it's still a space that you kind of have ownership of and that you can do what you want with. So I think that there's definitely, you'll see similar benefits. And I think there have been some studies on kind of allotment gardening, which have found, again, these associations with health and well-being. So real potential there.
But now here in the United States, we have some governors who have literally told people they couldn't garden during the COVID-19 epidemic. Like for instance, you were not allowed, I think in Minnesota or Michigan, maybe it's Michigan, you were not allowed to go to the store and buy seeds, which obviously that would be like the first thing you would do if you wanted to garden. And a lot of people complain that their gardens aren't going to be prepared because, the time to plant has passed. We have people saying that, oh, this is a bad idea going out and gardening. It's dangerous, COVID-19. But at the same time, couldn't it have actually been protective for people to garden? Is there any evidence that gardening conveys some sort of protection?
Well, I don't know about direct protection, but, if you could get out and garden, I think that just everyone, there are so many kind of pressures from COVID and lockdown and things like that, putting pressure particularly on people's mental health, and actually physical health as well, not being able to go out to the park, say for a run, that I think it's been important. And I guess something that's been talked about quite a lot in the media here in the UK anyway is, how lucky people who have access to a garden are, because they can get out and garden and potentially support their health that way, even if
I have to believe that being outdoors so people, I'm old. I'll be 62 this month. And I remember my parents talking about the TB epidemic, the tuberculosis epidemic here in the United States. And I remember them talking about that there was a movement. They discovered that when you had tuberculosis, the more time you spent outdoors in the sun, the fewer symptoms you developed, and you tended to stay robust. So tuberculosis used to be called consumption. And the reason they called it consumption is because this disease appeared to consume the host. They became weak and withered and hunched over and weaker, and then they eventually just died. And so what happened was people started to move out to California and out to Arizona, out to the desert, and they built sanitariums out there, because the sanitariums out there took you out of your room in the morning and put you out in front of the sun, sat you on a chair, laid you on a gurney. You stayed all day out there. You ate, you drank, you received whatever therapies. Then they brought you in at night and you slept indoors. And what they discovered was these people were outliving the people who were in sanitariums in the inner cities, where they just kept you in a room and locked up all the time because they were afraid you were going to give the disease to somebody else. And, it almost seems preposterous that our responses often to contractable, conveyable diseases is lock yourself up in your house, devoid of sun, recycle the air that everyone is breathing, and that's where you should be. And it baffles me, because I often think to myself, wow, our politicians are good at getting elected, but they really don't know anything about helping people get through tough times.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you don't want to put your foot in that one with me, but it just baffles me. I think that people, like, they should be saying, hey, while you're home, start a garden in your backyard. Like, get out there and work in the dirt instead of just staying in your home, afraid that there's this bubble of virus that's going to land in your nose. Like, get out there and do some work. So
I guess like that kind of sense of purpose thing, get out there and do some gardening. That's definitely going to help take your mind off things.
That would have been like, that's what they should have said. Hey, we're going to make you stay in your house for the next month. You have a backyard. Why don't you order some seeds online and garden? This is the time to go out in your backyard and garden. People would have been better off. They would have got sun. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick this discussion up. Maybe some of you in the audience will actually consider gardening if you haven't. We've actually done entire shows with Elisa Profumo on how to do your own box garden. I'll dig that show up, and maybe we'll rerun it this week so some of you can get on this. It's not too late. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Shawn Debell. We're talking about why you should spend more time in your garden. Of course, this question came up, and it's a question that I posed. Unfortunately, it just says Facebook user because this person who posted this question has security settings that don't allow us to show their name. Otherwise, we would. He says, maybe people who garden are just more happy in the first place. So we did talk about that, but there is some, you are able to tease out that even people who tended not to be happy in the beginning, after they gardened, they felt better.
Yeah, so it's the sort of thing that we included in our models as one of the controls, like how happy you would have been anyway.
Where is Mr. Lenore? I hope you can see me. My camera looks like it's working. At least to me, it does. Patrick Rogers, who has a farm, and the guy processes his own cows. I mean, he's never going to worry about the end of the world, the apocalypse, because he's got everything covered. He says, how many people actually are in a garden working? There are only 2 working in my garden. You're right. I get what you're saying. So you're responding to my comment about governors saying you're not allowed to garden. So I've come to the conclusion that many of the politicians who have taken strong positions in this COVID-19 know nothing, they're not critical thinkers. The governor in Illinois said only 2 people are allowed on a boat at one time, even if it's a cabin cruiser. And somebody said, but we're a family of 4. We've been living together this entire time, locked in the same house. Why can't we all 4 get on the boat? And the governor there said, no, only 2 people. Like, there's no rhyme or reason why governors are doing what they're doing. The idea that you can't garden, you can't buy seeds, that was just, I don't want to be harsh, but it's not founded in fact or science. People are just doing what they want to do. But you're absolutely right. And most of the time, people have fairly big gardens. You're social distancing being out in the garden a lot of time. So getting back to the study at hand, even though, green spaces play a role in this. Even if you don't garden, it seems to be better to live in greener areas. And I say this right now because we are literally looking at homes on more than 5 acres right now, because I want to be out in the country. I want a lot of land between me and the people that live by me. Not because I'm antisocial, but I just know that when I'm out in the country, I just feel less stressed out. There's got to be something else about being out there that's good for you, right?
Yeah, well, like you say about wanting to kind of be out there, I guess it's kind of fully immersing yourself in the natural world, isn't it? Thinking about all the different things that are more than just the gardening, things like the sounds of nature and being able to see just nature. Smells, touch, things like this.
Will your group try to ascertain the reasons why these phenomena occur? Will you start to look at anything that we can assess physiologically on people to determine, well, let's see why people feel better?
Yeah, so I think that we're interested in one of the first things that we've talked about looking at is different, what's in the garden, what's in people's gardens. Are there lots of trees, things like water? So there's been quite a lot of research at the centre showing that kind of environments with water and with particularly coastal environments that are good for health and well-being. So that'll be interesting to look at. And there's also some quite interesting research that's looked at how in gardens the trees that you're kind of the view of what you're seeing and the different trees you're seeing could potentially be linked to health. And I think another one that's quite interesting is looking at things like bird species, these kind of charismatic species that people are going to see a lot, and whether potentially they might be linked to your health and well-being. Because when we look at green spaces, spaces where people see more or perceive there to be more birds, butterflies, things like that, are actually found to be kind of more restorative, more better for your mental well-being as well.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, just being able to see off into the horizon, just being able to allow rays of light focused on infinity to fall upon the eye has a relaxing effect. We live in a world of within 6 feet. Everything we do is within 6 feet. Our dashboard, the bumpers of our cars, the monitors of our computers, the books that we read, everything is within 6 feet. This constant convergence and this constant refractory effect of having to muscles engage. When you look far away, everything in your eyes relax. The crystalline lens relaxes, stops pulling on the globe of the eye. The face feels that relaxation. The yoke muscles, the rectus muscles, they relax. The eye stares off. And that actual event, and that's why I tell people who work, if you work in a closed office, you have to find a way to exercise looking off into the horizon where everything relaxes, and you feel this sense of calm come over you immediately. And that happens naturally when you're out walking in the woods or you're in your garden and the nearest thing to you is the sky. It's like, wow, I could look up at the sky. It's a wonderful feeling. We forget, we have really not given any respect to evolution. We just think we're so smart. We can just biohack our way through everything. It's like, no, sometimes you got to go back to the basics and just look off into the horizon.
Yeah. I used to, so in my PhD, I worked in a lab for quite a lot of it, like looking at doing lots of microscope work, and I always used to set up my microscope because there was this big window with a tree in one corner, and that, my break staring off at that tree. Otherwise I'd come out at the end of the day and just not be able to, think.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating. And I am going to rerun the show. We did a couple shows. I've been doing this podcast for 14 years. I got a lot of shows that I could rerun. I could rerun my shows and not work for probably about 5 years. But we did 2 different shows about gardening at home. If you don't have a yard, you can create box gardens. You can do it on a patio if you live in an apartment complex. There's lots of ways to do this, and the benefits are there. The benefits are still there. You still get the sense of satisfaction watching something grow, nursing it along. And if it's a food product, actually putting it in salads with you and the kids and going, oh, wow, we grew this cucumber. How wonderful. I'm going to rerun those shows.
Coming back to the COVID thing, I guess, as well, like that's for people, particularly in, cities and things who might have been in lockdown for ages, being able to just have a window box or something like that could be something really beneficial.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful. And I would love for your group to look at certain aspects of that occur when gardening, right? The first one is grounding. You're actually grounded to the earth. There seems to be something to that. At least from a blood chemistry, it's evident that it happens quickly. There also seems to be something to the notion that there are microbes in the soil that convey a sense of well-being to the humans who put their hands in the soil. There's all these different mechanisms that would seem very, very interesting to me to go, wow, these are the things that happen, because most people in science will ignore correlation. Epidemiologists are always getting ragged on because, they correlate things, but sometimes those correlations are very, very casual. It's nice when we can pinpoint and say, well, this is actually what's happening that conveys this. Was there any evidence of how long it takes for people to report a sense of well-being once they started gardening? Is it something that had to happen over long periods of time, or does it happen very quickly?
So it's not something that we actually had data from in this survey, but some of the research that's gone on at the centre has looked at, so it was actually looking at visiting green spaces, but that was kind of finding that, if you spend 120 minutes in green space per week, and that could be on one day or it could be kind of spread out over the whole week, that was when the, real benefits started to emerge for your mental health.
Really?
So, yeah.
Quickly.
Mm.
Wow. That seems like that's not a heroic effort to just walk. If you walk, so basically, if you walk 4 times a week for 30 minutes in the green spaces around your town or, out in the wilderness, that alone is going to convey a sense of well-being.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
an easy thing. That's an easy thing to fix. Well, listen, I got to tell you, I think that this is all very fascinating stuff. I hope that you'll consider coming back and talking more about your research when it evolves.
When we get some more garden research going.
Yeah, and I'm going to get some. I'm going to rerun some old gardening shows, so we'll get people back into the idea of gardening. It's not too late. I know people go, "Oh, the planting season is past." It's still not too late. It's still not too late. Thank you, Dr. Debell, for coming on today.
Thank you.
Take care. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, I am going to either correct myself or defend myself We have a listener who sent me a question about my comments that if we locked down indefinitely, this virus would come back to haunt us once we started moving around again. So let's see how right or wrong I am. Stay tuned.
And we're ready.
Welcome back. So I have I got my speaker on there. Hold on. So I have been known to rant. First we got to acknowledge something. Patrick Rogers said you cannot grow tomatoes in a pot. And he's right, because they never get big. They stay very small. But I have seen people grow them in a gallon jug, like a milk container, where you cut the base off and hang it upside down. You pour the water in the top, and the plant is hanging upside down. I have seen them grow them that way. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Pat. But anyway, so back to the subject at hand. So recently I said that even if we were able to shut down for 6 months, everybody stayed in their house. Nobody went out. Everybody just stayed in their house, in their backyard and gardened and all that sort of stuff. That once we started moving around, that this virus would reemerge. And we have a fan of the show named Pasi. I'm going to try to pronounce it. It looks like Säkkinen. I hope I did it right. Who said in an email, very nice email, he's a big fan of the show, and he actually likes my rants because he says they force people to think. Maybe I should think more before I do them. Those rants have raised really good questions, but in one a few weeks ago, you stated that if everybody holed up for 6 months, it would not help anything. That everything would just restart after that, since the recovered people with antibodies, would restart it. That is not simply correct unless there is some new information that makes COVID-19 a virus that could somehow stay dormant in people instead of being killed by the immune system. He goes on, if there could be 100% lockdown, the people that would be susceptible would be dead and others recovered, and the virus in human population would have stopped existing. That's just not how it works. So there's several types of viruses, right? There's viruses that are chronic viruses, like herpes simplex. They become dormant. They go back into hiding. They come back again. But then there are viruses that are considered acute viruses, right? They hit you hard and then they're gone. So we've had lots of viruses that are supposed to be acute viruses that we get vaccines for all the time. I mean, so let's explore this from a couple different standpoints, and then I'm going to show you what the WHO and CDC think about this virus. If viruses work their way through our population and then disappeared, then we would have complete herd immunity. Mothers who would have babies would be born with that immunity, and that virus would never affect anybody ever again. If that's true, why are people getting vaccines for things that don't seem to be in the population any longer? Measles, mumps, rubella, polio. There are people who say we have eradicated polio with the vaccine. If we eradicated polio with the vaccine, then no one would need the vaccines going forward, because the mothers would have had a immunity conferred to them by the vaccine. They would have given birth. Oh, wait a minute. Vaccines don't work like that. That's right. I forgot. Vaccines don't confer immunity. You have to keep taking the vaccine. So where are the viruses living? Where are they living? Do they live out in the air? In the clouds? In the dirty carpet? Where do they live? Where do they live from season to season? Some like the flu, the seasonal flu, we get hit with it for what, a couple, 3 months? That means, 8, 9 months out of the year. Where is it? Is it in the clouds? Where is it? No, it's in people. It's in people. But our immune system is keeping it in check. So having a virus and having symptoms from a virus are very, very different things. Everybody agrees with that. That's why we're really realizing that COVID-19 has a mortality rate stratified by age, but a general mortality rate of like 0.36, which is just slightly higher than the seasonal flu. However, it's more contagious than the seasonal flu, but we know that more and more people have it that never got symptoms. So where do viruses go when they are sleeping? When it comes to COVID-19, both the WHO and CDC agree that they're not sure when it comes to COVID-19. They're not sure if it's a chronic virus because there have been people who have had it and got reinfected. What? Wait a minute. So I had the virus, I got better from the virus, and then I got reinfected. And in fact, they even say that they're not sure if these people got reinfected because they came in contact with it a second time, or if they actually had a dormant version of the virus living in them that just came back around. So no one is really sure about this virus. Let's not also forget that viruses mutate. When you get a virus and your immune system works on it as best as it can, that viruses adapt to make sure that your immune system can't eradicate it. The virus that you pass on may actually already be mutated to be a little bit stronger than the one that you got. This is pretty well known. No one knows if COVID-19 is mutating. Usually the sign that it's mutating is second, third waves that are worse than the first. And also second waves have happened in every viral outbreak in the history of man. Second and third waves happened in the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919. And the second wave was, some people said, as bad as the first. Some people said it was not as bad, but clearly there was a second wave. And then there was a third wave. So we are not sure. When we think we understand viruses, but you have to understand viruses are living things that are programmed to survive, and they survive in hosts. They survive in people. So with the CDC and the WHO weighing in and saying, we're not sure if this is a dormant virus in people, because we have seen people who have gotten a second round of it. We don't know if it's because they came in contact. They had the antibodies. They fought it off the first time. They had the antibodies. They got it a second time, which may actually mean that it's really dependent on your immune system. The way I understand viruses is that once you have them, they stop making the particles that make you sick, and the immune system basically keeps them under check. But they can come back. That's what I've always read about viruses. So we don't kill them. We don't kill them. We arrest them. Right? When you have virus software, it puts it in a virus vault, right? So it can't hurt your computer, but it's still there. You have to get rid of it. So the way I understand viruses to work is viruses become dormant, meaning no symptoms. And once they're dormant, they can come back around, especially if all of a sudden the guards that have been keeping it in the virus vault kind of get weak. And the virus is like, oh, I'm going to break out now. I'm going to do this all over again. And the truth is, nobody knows for sure. No one knows about this virus. Japan and China, as well as North Korea, have had patients who were tested positive for COVID-19 and not contagious. They also had people test positive for COVID-19 and have the antibodies too, which showed that they had gotten over it. And they say they're not contagious. I don't understand how you can't be contagious if you still have a living version of the virus in you. And the truth of the matter is, nobody knows. All these people that we're turning to and looking for good information and advice how to survive this don't know an effing thing. We see this every day here in the United States with Anthony Fauci. One day this is good, one day that's bad. One day this is okay, one day that's not okay. They're learning as they go, just like us. So my humble opinion is you have to make your own choices on how you're going to survive this. And for me, I really think that this virus can come back around. I think there are people out there who don't have symptoms and are carrying it. Maybe they have antibodies, maybe they don't. Maybe some are contagious, maybe some aren't. I mean, we just don't know. We really don't. And that's not just me that doesn't know. The CDC doesn't know. The WHO doesn't know. So, like, who else is going to tell us? Like, they're saying some people are saying the same things I'm saying, that no matter how long you wait this out, it's gonna show back up in our population. So let's get it over with now. Then there's other people who say, no, the longer we stay locked down, it's gonna die because our immune system is going to kill it. And if that's true, why are we taking vaccines for things that have been eradicated from our population? See, folks, The problem is when you apply critical thinking and you start to actually use critical thinking broad scale, like, well, if that's true, then why is this not true? All of a sudden you go, wow, nobody knows anything. And what they do know, they're keeping quiet because they want to sell drugs and vaccines and they want us to depend on the healthcare industry. Maybe all we need to do is get out and garden more. I know vitamin D will protect you from it. No one will ever tell me different. Almost 3 months ago, I wrote the article about sun, vitamin D, and how it actually, the immune system can actually eradicate and arrest COVID-19. People with the highest 25 hydroxy levels have 0 symptoms when they get infected. So anyway, that's it for today. I'm actually off tomorrow, but we have great shows the rest of the week, so hope you can tune in live. And please, Pasi, thank you, Pasi. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I don't think he's watching live because it's probably the middle of the night there, but I want to put his name up again. It's Pasi Säkkinen. I'm trying. Thank you for the question. And I appreciate people asking these kind of questions. I really do. Wait, we have a comment here. Joe Ferry showed up. Greetings. How you doing, Joe? All right, well, that's it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Start a garden. I'll rerun some shows about gardening for those of you who want to do this in your own home space. I think it's worthwhile. It really is. And it's not too late to start gardening. You can plant stuff now. All right, we'll talk to you Wednesday.